Over the past 2 years, the landscape of pro obbying has changed dramatically. Since the removal of Pit of Misery from the main EToH game in June last year, pro obbyists have looked to other places for harder towers. One of these places is the Eternal Abyss by Blockerman. However, what this means for EToH and pro obbying itself is still unclear. In this video, I'm going to interview the owner of EToH and a developer for the game, as well as diving deep into player count statistics to find out if the Eternal Abyss is doing more harm than good. First of all, I just want to mention that I'm aware of tension this has caused between the owners in the past. Do not harass anyone mentioned in this video. That is stupid. I'm not trying to cause drama for 2 videos in a row. Also, since writing the first paragraph of the script, the conditions of me and eternalist's interview have changed, so I won't be using any direct quotes from their interview. Before I piss people off though, subscribers on the road to 15,000 subscribers, only 23% of you guys are. Okay, so since Pit of Misery was removed, many players have moved over to the Eternal Abyss to play Soul Crushings. Right? Well, kind of. I'm going to try and prove it, though. For reference, what you're seeing now is a graph of the Eternal Abyss's player count from 1 year ago. As you can see, there's sort of a low point around June last year. However, at the start of July, there's a big jump, and it stayed around that mark ever since. Now I'm going to put an arrow on the graph of when EToH removed Pit of Misery from the main game. Now, I know correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation here, but for me, this is pretty obvious. People who want to play harder towers aren't satisfied with what's currently in EToH. There are 44 Soul Crushers in EToH, which is nearly a quarter of what T has to offer, and most of the EToH Soul Crushings are shit anyway, so it would make sense why people would naturally gravitate towards that game. Now, you can still have some doubt that this may not be true and do that, because you should at the end of the day. Don't just believe what a random YouTuber says. That's ridiculous. But what really did it for me is the release of Starry Night, right? For reference, Starry Night is the easiest area in the Eternal Abyss. Most of the towers here are insane to catastrophic, which directly impedes on EToH's soul-crushing player base. Again, I'm going to say this a lot in this video. Blockerman is allowed to do this. He's not doing anything wrong by creating this. But since Starry Night's release, the average player count has increased even more. And you can speculate as to why this is, but the obvious answer is by making an area that is easier, it enlarges the demographic T can appeal to. I'm not trying to bombard you with graphs and numbers, but there is evidence that backs this up as well. Practically since February, EToH's player count has not fallen off a cliff, but it's at the very least jumped off the cliff. And there was a soft landing at the bottom, but the cliff's looking pretty tall, guys. We're not getting back up. This is largely due to creators like Bundun not showing as much interest in the game anymore. It's largely affected the players who play more casually, like their hardest is laptop splitting or true skill, that sort of range. Because Bundun has only been playing for around 10 months, so hadn't had much time to progress. Eternal Abyss's player count since February has stayed the exact same. If actually, since April, it's actually gone up a little bit, which is completely opposite to what's happened with EToH. It's probably because these players were playing before Bundun was even remotely streaming the game at all, so they wouldn't really care if he stopped playing. Again, you can disagree, but in my opinion, it's pretty obvious that the Eternal Abyss and EToH are fighting for players here. Now, I wanted to get people that are involved in the situation's opinion, so I interviewed Adri, who was a builder. This was more of a backstory, so I knew what I was getting myself into, but they did say,
I don't think it really does, because it's an SC game, and not a huge chunk of the player base is SC oriented as much. T's more for higher end SC players. EToH doesn't really contain many of those. When someone searches up EToH or Eternal Towers of Hell, T pops up second. For new players, they might be more enticed to go towards the game with a bigger title or a cooler icon. I don't know. It just steals players from the game, unintentionally.
I also wanted to get an interview with Blockerman. He declined, unfortunately, but he did say that...
That just doesn't make much sense, does it? Because the games are aimed at different player bases. Sure, there's a lot of overlap, but that's bound to happen with every tower game.
In Eternalis's interview, they said...
No, they're different demographics, just the same type of game.
So clearly there's 2 conflicting opinions here, so this was my final resort. Today, as I write in this script, I put a poll on my community tab. It was a pretty simple question. Do you beat SCs in the Eternal Abyss or in EToH? And would you look at that? 27% of people beat SCs in the Eternal Abyss and not EToH, which is a significant proportion given I don't really make videos that would be of interest to better players. Like, I don't make completions or something like that. Okay, so what does this mean for the game's future? Well, I'm going to outline 2 scenarios. Both are bad. One's significantly worse than the other, but I want to mention it because it is possible. It's far-fetched, but it's possible. Okay, so worst scenario first. The pro being seen is absolutely massive, like bigger than anyone seems to realize. It's what pulls eyes onto the community as a major advertising factor for games and games involved. When you search up the hardest obby game on Roblox to YouTube, what comes up mostly is EToH. When Bundun first streamed EToH, it was advertised as the actual hardest game on Roblox, but now that's just kind of not true anymore. What I can see happening is that as players get better, more and more transfer to playing the Eternal Abyss, but because EToH is now being played by less streamers, less new players come and play the game. This cycle just kind of continues until EToH's player count just kind of self-destructs, basically. Eternal Abyss will probably also take a hit from this as players will naturally leave the community, but its player count will probably be above EToH's at this point. Again, unlikely, and if not unlikely, very far in the future, but I wanted to mention it. The second scenario, and probably the more likely one, is that EToH's popularity just kind of slowly falls to sort of juke ownership level of around 500 players. This is because less streamers and YouTubers will play the game from outside, as previously mentioned, so less players will come in, but the game will still hold a strong player base of some casual and mostly like wannabe competitive obvious who are like hardest, like terrifying, catastrophic, that sort of range. While this isn't the worst thing in the world, I think we can all agree that we'd rather see the game thrive, and while there are ways to do this, a lot needs to change to make this happen. Okay, so there are 3 paths EToH could take here. None of them are gonna happen. Number 1 is the most likely, but it's not that likely. Okay, so option 1 is that EToH can add horrifics and unreals to the game. This would kind of restore the game's hardest game sort of status, although these soul crushing need to be of substantial quality to actually win people back. To add to this, the game should probably add more soul crushings to the game as well. I did another poll on my community tab, and around a quarter of the people that responded said they were disappointed that Zone 10 was reverted back to a more normal area rather than it being mostly soul crushings like Ring 9. So it's clearly what some people want. That poll hasn't been out for very long, so it's a pretty small sample size at the minute, but that 27% is almost exactly the same percentage as the people that beat SCs in the Eternal Abyss, which I thought was interesting, although maybe don't read into that much. Now, since right early bits of the script, I've been told I'm not allowed to directly quote from Eternalist's interview, but what I can say is that Eternalist believes this won't benefit the game, as games, according to them, have different demographics. The couple messages I've had with Blockerman when I was trying to get an interview of him shows he believes the same. Okay, so if that's not an option, well, what about option 2? Well, this is far-fetched, but maybe they could, like, merge, potentially, maybe not. This is the best outcome here, in my opinion, but if anyone are involved in these 2 games, I think it should really be considered. There is literally no downside to all 3 parties here. Owners with EToH would get more players back into the game and could use its marketing tool. Owners of the Eternal Abyss would get more players funneled into their areas because they'll have access to more beginner players, and players will have more soul crushings to play, which people actually care about. The only downside to this, and keep in mind, I'm really clutching at straws here, is that if there are so many soul crushings in the game, beating one may not feel as special, potentially, maybe. Well, will this happen? It won't. It won't happen, not in today's current state. Not only will the 2 games have to figure out who's getting a cut of what, which would be a fucking nightmare. When I asked Adri about if he could see the 2 games being merged, he just said,
no. I don't see that happening ever.
When I asked Eternalist, again, I'm stretching what I can say here, but they didn't say yes. Just a little backstory from experiences with both owners. They both seem to find this debate quite a touchy subject, to be honest, which I think it shouldn't, guys, like, something's gotta happen here, in my opinion. Eternalist originally agreed to do the interview, and I have all the questions up on my monitor, but rejected out of fear of causing drama, which they are totally allowed to do. When I asked Blockerman to do the interview, I'm not trying to be mean to Blockerman because I know there's a lot of tension here, but it just kind of felt like I struck a nerve. He didn't seem very happy about it. Adri, who gave me backstory on the situation, said that
No, I don't think there was any communication between EToH staff and T.
Which to me, again, this is my opinion, but it doesn't sound like the most cooperative two groups of people. He also said that...
Yeah, so I do remember there being like talks about it. I don't know if there was ever an attempt to DMCA the game, but I know the big reason the idea was even on the table is that T's been using EToH's like name and image for its own personal gain since it started.
Now, this is really, really important, but this is alleged. This may not be true. This might not have happened. I just wanted to put it here because it does show that a merger seems far off. However, this was really interesting. He did say that...
I think one of them more than the other.
Do you want to say who, or have you kept that secretive for a reason?
I'll keep that a secret just
Okay.
in case they say it themselves.
So maybe it could happen, but none of them seem to indicate it could. Okay, so this is the next option. It's only really relevant if one of them tries to do the previous and the other says no. But like maybe one of the games could like buy the other one. Keep in mind, this is so far-fetched. This is from like... I've fetched this from like Mars, bro. Given the reasons mentioned before, if I was one of them, I feel like this should actually be considered. There'd be so much money involved. They'd basically have to offer the other person enough money to the point where they could just literally not refuse it. I think we can all agree this won't happen, but I thought I'd put it here just as like a thing that I could say to like put the watch time up. I'm putting the watch time up by keep going on this segment. Keep going. Keep watching the video. Okay, so where does this leave the game right now? Well, to be honest, I can't see EToH growing in its current state. You've got two games here directly competing against each other when, to be honest, they just don't need to be at all. In fact, if you actually added the Eternal Abyss's player count to EToH's player count over the last 6 months, sure, it's still not a great picture, but it's definitely a better picture. At the end of the day, I wanted to make this video to try and awaken people to what's going on, because I just feel like this is being completely ignored. Just completely, no one's even talking about this. While the game completely dying seems far-fetched, it's not impossible, and I certainly think both EToH and the Eternal Abyss would both benefit from joining together, but I'm just a guy. What do you guys think? Leave a comment below. Thank you to my members on screen. I hope you have a good weekend, everyone. Goodbye.